Today, we're tackling something that thousands of EU contractual staff lose sleep over: how to actually pass an internal competition and secure a permanent position. My guest today, Mr. Neil Urquhart, has coached over 350 candidates through this exact process. So let's start right here. What are we really talking about today, and why is this such a critical moment for contractual staff at the European Commission, Neil?
When you're working at the European Commission, you have some chances to get a permanent role. As contractual staff, it's really a bit like a ticking time bomb. You've got one, two, three, up to maybe 8 years, depending if you can juggle some contracts. But really, your time is limited and it's running out. And also, there's always that stressful time around renewal date. Are you going to get renewed? How are you going to get renewed? There's also limited career opportunities when you're contractual staff. You don't get to go on certain courses or you get passed over for certain projects. Pass this internal competition, the series of three tests that you get, then you become permanent staff and you have a job for life, a great salary, a great pension, great benefits, and a great job as well, great career, ability to work in an international environment in a prestigious organization. So it's really life changing.
Before we get into what you actually do, what actually works, let's
Hmm.
talk about what's going wrong. From your experience coaching hundreds of candidates, what are the three biggest reasons talented, hardworking contractual staff fail these competitions?
Oh, yeah, right. There's a few, but let's try three. The scoring system is opaque. You don't really know that they don't reveal what's on the scoring system. A typical candidate might be fantastic at her job, but she's no idea exactly what the markers are looking for. If she's in the written test, she writes pretty good answers. She answers all the questions, but just not good enough. She's also competing against people just like her, smart, talented, highly educated, hardworking, but that she doesn't exactly know how it's being scored. The second thing I'd say the biggest challenge is nerves. Mostly, when you've done university exams, you don't have experience. You might get some nervousness around it, but these are really life-changing exams, and people get more nervous than they usually would be for other types of exams. They get very, very stressed. And when you get stressed, you can't operate at your intellectual peak. You will just go to you can't think strategically, you can't think creatively, you can't think yourself out of this difficult problem that you're being faced with. So you end up doing below par work. So nerves destroy performance. The final challenge I was saying, it's one of the most important, is preparing with bad feedback or no feedback. Not knowing exactly what they're looking for is linked to this. So this person, she might get feedback from her colleagues who don't really know what they're talking about. She might even get feedback from people who are hierarchy, but they also don't really know what the scoring's around. And so she gets bad feedback, get enough individual feedback, and keeps doing the same inefficient way of studying and working. Those are the three big ones. Scoring system's opaque, so she doesn't know what she's actually getting marked on. Her nerves destroy her performance, and she may be preparing with bad or well-meaning but bad feedback and doesn't really know, therefore, how to improve.
Those are formidable obstacles. What does it actually cost someone if they can't overcome those, if they can't fix those obstacles? What's at stake?
Well, there's the obvious answer, which is salary. She won't get paid more. She's going to lose out on that, and it's not a big difference at the beginning. But if she's done 8 years of work at the commission, she could be on a lot more, on a lot larger salary. So there's that. There's also the career opportunities, getting into being promoted into team leader, head of sector, head of unit. And there's another cost that people don't really think about, and that's the cost of having to do it again. The regrets about not passing the first time, and the confusion. Why didn't I pass? Where did I go wrong? And having to go back to the bottom of a mountain and start again. Um, and you really putting yourself through that. And sometimes people take a year to prepare for this exam overall, in the amount of time. So it can be really, really tough if they don't fail. The regret and the worry and the hard effort that it takes.
Okay, so that's the reality for a lot of people right now. But clearly, there's a better way because your candidates do pass. Give us a glimpse of what's possible when someone finally understands how this system actually works.
So if you just answer the questions, let's take the written exam, for example. If you just answer the questions, you're going to get a kind of medium pass mark. You might pass, but the problem is you're going to be on the borderline. So we don't know. It's 50-50. And
Right.
also you're competing against people just like you, very hardworking, lots of study, they may well be in with a chance too. So it really becomes like a bit of a coin toss. What I coach people to do is hit the right anchors, the right points in the scoring system so that their mark is better than everyone else's or way up there and they're a clear pass. There's things around clarity, being clear, well structured with well reasoned arguments in the written exam. And in the oral competition, it's something different again. But if we just stick with the written exam, you're not bad at exams because after all, usually the people who I'm coaching are extremely successful. They've been to top universities in Europe. They've been to Oxford or LSE or the Sorbonne or top universities in Europe. And they're very good at passing exams. But this is one exam that you can't just study knowledge for. You have to know how to pass it. So that's the real problem. You need to understand how points are actually awarded, not just assume how you assume they're awarded. And once you do that, everything changes. Your preparation gets sharper, your answers get better structured and more well reasoned, and that's when you can get a clearly outstanding mark.
Love that distinction. And we're going to unpack exactly how that works in a moment. And by the way, those of you who are watching and you're already thinking, oh, that sounds like me, you can book a session with Neil using the link right below this video. It's a chance to get some personalized feedback on exactly where you stand and what's holding you back. The link is in the description below. Let's rewind if we could, Neil. You've
Sure.
been doing this for years and you've coached hundreds of people through these competitions. How did you actually discover that the way most people prepare is fundamentally wrong? Was there a specific moment or a certain candidate that made you realize, I need to teach this differently?
In some ways, part of the answer was I knew that already very quickly. I've been teaching writing at Writing with Impact at the European Union institution since 2008. And way back in 2012, somebody asked me, "Can I help? Can you help me with this competition?" And I said, "Sure. Well, you tell me about the competition and what's required to pass, and I'll see if I can coach you through it." Uh, and one of the things I discovered is people just don't write efficiently. They don't plan enough, so they don't know what to write when they're writing. When they're writing, they're editing, and then they're wasting time multitasking. And then they get to the end after correcting all the grammar and typos and spelling and punctuation whilst they're writing. And they get to the end and they got almost no time to have this big picture overview of the text. So they don't really get a proper edit. And so the document is imbalanced. They prepare in the wrong way because they're preparing a method that's flawed. And I realized this when, after this first year of coaching this one person, I didn't put enough emphasis and I didn't believe enough in my methodology to get them to make sure they were not multitasking, that they separate their planning, their drafting, and the editing into three different processes. They kept going back to bad old habits, and therefore they ran out of time. So after doing that for a couple of times, then I realized this isn't working, and I need to insist. I need to double down on the method and get
Mm-hmm.
people really going for it. Nowadays, I'm coaching people to make sure that they bring this into their work and they don't just leave it to the exam because it needs habit change.
Hey, for someone watching right now, maybe she's a contract agent. She's got a competition coming up in a few months. She's been trying to prepare on her own in the evenings, and that can be very tiring after a long day at work. What's one thing she could do today to start preparing more efficiently, more effectively?
I would say make sure that you separate out the planning, the drafting, and the editing. So your planning should be about 40% of the time. 40% of 90 minutes is 36 minutes. So really you need to get your plan fully fleshed out before you start. Because if you don't know what you're going to write, then you're not going to be able to write it in the heat of the exam. Then you got to do drafting. And drafting is just writing. It's your provisional version. It's not your finished text. And that should be about 25% of the time. And that's 22 and a half minutes in a 90-minute exam. I know it's very precise, but minute or two either side is fine. 5 minutes either side, that's not so good. So drafting, they just write, don't stop, don't edit. You make mistakes, keep going. You can't think in English, you're writing it in French or German or Lithuanian, you just keep going. And then you get to the end, and then you don't fix all your typos, your misspelling. You actually start looking for strategy. You look at have I answered all the questions? Yes, but have I linked my argument? Does everything flow into my conclusion from my first section, my second section, my third section? It can't just be separate answers, and it's not just about having nice transitions between the section. Then you look at the structure. Is it structured well enough? Then and only then do you look at the style and how you've been writing. Is it too formal? Is it too mixed? What do I need to change? The very last thing is you do the typos because typos don't actually cost you very many marks at all. And that's what the examiners have told me when I've spoken to them in other competitions. So you don't need to focus on those little things. You need to separate out, avoid multitasking as much as possible, and separate it into three different parts: planning, drafting, and editing.
That's really practical. Do you have an example, maybe a candidate who came to you in a similar situation and who was able to turn things around with your help?
Yes. So one one person, she came to me, she's French. She had a quite a high-powered job with a senior leader, and she had failed this competition three times before. And what I admire about her is her, just to get back up. I lived in Japan for a few years, and one of the Japanese sayings is, uh, fall down seven times, stand up eight. And she was really an embodiment of that she kept going. But she didn't know exactly what she was doing wrong. She didn't know what she was doing wrong in the written test, and she didn't know what she was doing wrong in the oral test when she got there too. And she was in two competitions for different grades. And she really didn't know when we first started, and she got one of the best marks I've seen in the written test. And then in the oral test, she passed both stages, both types, sorry, both two different exams, two different grades. And so after failing three times, failing at different stages, a written test or the oral test, and she passed both of them. So she was absolutely ecstatic, of course. But that's what she was. That was the struggle, that she didn't really know what she was doing wrong.
What a great story. And those of you who are watching and thinking, Oh, that sounds exactly like my situation. The link to book a session with Neil is right below this video. So don't keep preparing the same way you've always done it and hope for a different result. Contact Neil. One other question. Let's go a little deeper. A lot of people watching will have the written part on their mind, but there's also the oral, as you have mentioned. What's the biggest mistake candidates make in the oral exam? And what do they need to understand so they can actually perform well under the pressure of the oral questioning?
Yeah, there's two parts to the oral exam. There's a presentation, and then straight afterwards, there's an interview, and they both pose different types of challenges. But
Mm-hmm.
the pressure and performance anxiety really stops people from performing well. And so not knowing how to reduce your nerves before you start, in the middle of the exam when you don't know the answer to a question or you suddenly freeze and in the spotlight, as it were, what you need to do in the run up to the exam, even the night before, and what your preparations, your I'm not talking about studying, but how you get yourself well rested, and you're not just cramming knowledge into your brain before. So it's really about managing that process in, because if you don't manage your performance when you're there and manage your nerves, you're just not going to perform very well. And you're not going to be authentic in the exam. You're going to be like a deer in the headlights. And you need to be being relaxed when being interviewed says a lot in itself. This says that somebody who is capable of operating under pressure. So that says a lot.
So it's not about memorizing answers, it's about performing differently
Yeah.
from what they typically would have done. Could you share another quick story? Maybe someone who really struggled with nerves or had a tough starting point, but managed to recover and come through with success.
Yeah. So I work with another Italian woman, and she was struggling with what to say in her answers to her questions. She was quite a confident presenter, but she struggled with presenting on a random topic immediately. And then in the questions, she was struggling with what to say. She'd been taught at what, from my perspective, is well-meaning but bad advice, sticking to this very rigid structure of STAR and emphasizing the wrong thing, that situation, task, action, result. She was very well rehearsed on the surface. Like she appeared very polished, but it's a false performance or a false success, I'd say. You appear very polished, but also you appear fake, and you're not authentic. I always say you need to pay your VAT. It's not value-added tax, it's vulnerability plus authenticity builds trust. It was very polished, but so are so many people when they come to interview. They're like, "Hi, and
Yeah,
choose me. What do you want me to say? I'll say anything you want. Just give me the job." And they're not very authentic. They just say what they think the examiner wants to hear, or they try to appear impressive. But really, you're in with a group of people who are extremely impressive already, just by being in the room, by getting to that part of the stage of the competition. So you need to bring out that vulnerability and authenticity, which is almost the antithesis of what they're being taught by other people.
I can imagine. Before we wrap it up, Neil, if there's one thing you would want every contractual agent watching to take away today, what would that one thing be?
The difference between people who pass and people who don't is rarely your knowledge. It's rarely the amount of study you do. It's rarely how intelligent you are. It's method, and it's getting good personalized feedback from somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Anyone watching who's ready to stop guessing and start working properly, Tell us exactly what happens when they book that first session with you. What do they walk away with?
So in this particular case, right now we're talking about the written test. You could also book for oral competition too, but for the written test, we'll go through a case study. That is, you produce an answer for me. I give you a case study to do. You choose one of them, or I'll indicate which one you take. Then you spend the time doing it and you submit it to me 24 hours before a session. And then I go through with you exactly what you did well and what you need to do better and differently. And they're based on the real criteria that the examiners use. So it's really, you're left in no doubt about what you need to change. It's recorded. You also get all my preparatory materials to keep. Really, we go into depth and you get really customized and clear feedback on what you need to change. I write notes. It's really clear about what you need to change. And also, you get an experience of my methodology and how that might help you pass the exam this time without running out of time at the end and submitting a really poorly worded or poorly structured answer.
This has been brilliant, Neil. Thank you for sharing all of this. To everyone watching, especially if you're a contractual agent preparing for a competition right now, the link to book a conversation with Neil is right below this video. Stop preparing alone. Get the method that actually matches the system.
Thank you very much, Robert.
It's a delight, Neil.